All right, I'm Michael Stanley. Welcome to the Sell-Side Podcast. And today we've got Hayden Worsham of Worsham Brothers. Hayden, thanks so much for being on with us.
Yeah, no, thank you, Michael. I've really enjoyed listening to the podcasts that you've done previously. They're so informative, and for a guy that has gone through this, it's eye opening to see that there's a lot of lessons learned in those. And
Man, I'm just happy that you're listening. We grew up together, and I figured you kind of just I don't know what Michael knows about this stuff, so I'm probably not going to listen. So I'm glad that you've enjoyed it. And we spoke in Corinth not too
yeah,
long ago, and it just dawned on me that like your story is exactly what we're trying to
mm,
capture. And so I appreciate you coming over here
yeah,
and being on with us, man. I'm excited to hear about it. So, I mean, just diving right in, kind of give us the history of Worsham Brothers, where it came from, and then we'll talk a little bit about its current and future.
yeah. So, we're general contractors located in Corinth, Mississippi. We work in Mississippi, Alabama, Tennessee, a little bit in Kentucky, and a little bit in Arkansas. But we're really mid-South, and we turn 80 this October, which is exciting, and very excited about that anniversary coming up. But my great grandfather started a company, so I'm fourth generation. He and with his two younger brothers, his younger brothers at that time were both in the Pacific, World War II, so 1945 when the company was established. And my great grandfather at the time, there was age limits to join the military, and he was beyond the age limit, and so he was back in Mississippi working for Mississippi Department of Transportation, building highways. And at that time, there was a pretty large investment that the government was making in roads and bridges. And so, and his two younger brothers were both in Japan building runways and really kind of behind the front lines of helping, that Pacific strategic push, make its way through Japan. And so, and all three of them were civil engineers from Ole Miss back 100 years ago. But he felt that he had a duty to his little brothers to make sure they came back with a career. He was at Mississippi Department of Transportation, and then his the middle son was with DuPont. He worked a little bit on the Manhattan Project. Pre-war, and then the youngest had been with TVA. So, and again, that's a really important time in American history. So they got a lot of exposure to what it means to, work in construction, manage construction, and so my great grandfather wrote him a letter, and the letter basically said, "Look, I want you guys to come back and have a company to come home to, and we're going to start a heavy civil construction company, and we're going to build roads and bridges. There's a need for it. There's a market here. You guys know how to do it. I'm going to run the business. You guys are going to help me run the projects, and send me $500, which at that time was everything."
Big money.
Yeah, and so for $1,500 in October of 1945, this thing got off the ground. So
Wow. I've heard portions of the story since I was a child. I've never heard like the full. That's incredible.
yeah,
I had no idea that's kind of how it kind of all came together. So what did they, what happens post war?
yeah. So my great uncle Clifford gets back Christmas of 45. Companies, their first contracts in October of 45. So my great grandfather's kind of running the business with him and one other employee, and then the youngest comes back really February of 46. So the three of them really didn't work together until 1946. So 6 months after the company had been established. So their main focus was highways and bridges and roads, and at that time it was needed, right? And so they worked in the 40s, 50s, and 60s, part of Natchez Trace Parkway. They worked there, Interstate 55 in DeSoto County and West Mississippi. So they kind of worked all over. They worked Tennessee, Kentucky, and South Mississippi. And it's kind of funny. um, we've got a couple of employees left that worked with that original generation, and they're over 30 years. We've got 30-year veterans. We've got one employee that's been there for this will be his 46th year. So
Wow.
really neat to hear those
That's
stories kind of
incredible.
early on. But I regret, and if there's one thing that I wish I did have was a map of all the roads and bridges that they built. Because
Yeah.
to me that feels so interesting that there's probably a bridge somewhere that that my family's had
Man,
a piece that to travel over. So
that's so cool. That sounds like, I helped a client of mine, and we've actually had him on the podcast, Dale Watcher, selling his business. And he always said, it's like the Hotel California, they stay, but they never leave.
yeah,
I mean, you rarely see employees stick around that long. That's
yeah,
incredible.
yeah, and that's what. And I want to talk about this later, but there's a lot of love that the folks that are at Worsham Brothers have for the company,
Mhm.
and I don't think it's necessarily a specific person that they love. There's just a true love for the business,
Mhm.
for what they do, and who they do it with. So, that was really eye opening, and I think that started with the three brothers,
Right.
and so anyways, they did that till, really until the 90s. But in the 60s, my grandfather and his older brother joined the company. And that's really when Worsham Brothers started becoming more of a commercial contractor. There
Yeah.
until that time, it was highways, bridges, and roads. And that was
Government
really,
work.
yeah, that's right. And then my great uncle and my grandfather really kind of found that there was a market need for general contractors
Mhm.
in North Mississippi and West Tennessee. And my great uncle was a structural engineer, and he developed a relationship with a company in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, Star Building Systems, who we're still partnered with today after, you know, for 60 plus years. But they really got heavy into industrial manufacturing, warehousing with these pre-engineered metal buildings,
Yeah.
and so that's really highways, bridges, and then general contracting in the 60s and 70s. And Worsham Brothers started a ready mix concrete plant late 60s, and had that throughout the 70s. Worked a lot on the 10 Tom waterway in East Mississippi and West Alabama, providing concrete for that. And then they ended up selling the ready mix plant. But the general contracting business is one that just really never went away.
Mhm.
And we continue to get better at it. And my dad joined the company in 1980s. And in the 90s, there were like any long period of time, you go through hard times, and that was one of the hard
Yeah.
times in the 90s. So um, there had been a gentleman that had worked for my great grandfather to start his career. He went out and started his own heavy civil construction company, and they were able to leverage that relationship to infuse capital back into the business.
Mhm.
And from that point, that's really when Worsham Brothers started to really grow substantially in the general contracting world.
So real quick, with that capital infusion, what did the cap stack turn to? I mean, obviously your wholly family owned company for most of the history, and then you take on a capital partner. Did the family still own a majority of the shares, or what did that new capital partner do?
They bought the majority of the shares, and so my great uncle at that time, his children were not in the business, and I think at that point he was pretty, you know on the back end of his career, so he felt like this was probably a good opportunity for
Right.
his way out. My grandfather held on to some shares, but they owned the company
Hmm.
for all intents and purposes. And what was so important was that the construction company that they owned, um, that capital or working capital allowed us as commercial contractors to expand
Right.
our surety
Hmm.
availability and our
Yeah.
bonding.
Balance sheet, basically.
That's exactly right. And so that opened the door to bigger projects. And so that's late 90s, and then the 2000s were really a really fun time for Worsham Brothers. And so,
Mm.
it's so interesting to see how you can go from one decade and things get tough, and the next they can be so good.
Mhm.
And my grandfather died in 2011, and I say this all the time. The market in Mississippi is a little bit slower to feel the heat of recessions, and a little bit slower to feel the love of good times. So
Sure.
it's just probably the pace and the culture of Mississippi a
Yeah.
little bit. But nonetheless, things got hard again, and what I found. Um, as I was going through my due diligence was the unbelievable resilience of the company. The bones were so good, and when I say bones, the people. And so the people that were there during the really, really good times stayed when it was not great.
Yeah.
And I was blown away. And because I felt like in some instances when things get tough, people start pulling the ripcord and they're out. And
Right.
really impressed by that. And so today we are still commercial contractors. We operate in West Tennessee, Mississippi, Alabama. We've got an amazing base of customers that really value what we do and how we do it. We are not a large general contractor. We operate in mid-sized projects, but where I think we stand apart is we provide a different experience for our customers, specifically how a project is both sequenced and administered, both from a project operations, but also from the office side.
Yeah.
And I think there's a need there. I think that you can go find. There's some large general contractors in the state of Alabama that have amazing reputations, uh, but in the state of Mississippi, there's not a lot of small general contractors that are able to perform those same administrative duties and then conduct the work in the field
Mhm.
like the big guys do. And so I like to think it's more of a boutique firm. We're
Yeah.
pretty particular on the projects that we team up with. It's got to be a really good fit for us. We really want the owners to value the what we're providing. Um, in that we've our business has grown really by word of mouth and the operations that we conduct
Yeah.
in the field. So that speaks to the hard work that the folks at Worsham Brothers are currently doing and in our growth.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So I want to put a pin in 2011, back up a little bit. So you're obviously great grandfather started the company, then your grandfather is involved, your dad's involved.
Hmm.
For the listeners at home, Hayden and I both grew up in a small town in East Mississippi called Corinth.
Hmm.
Um, kind of walk through your story. So you grew up around the business. Kind of give us your rundown up into the point where you reintegrate with Worsham Brothers.
Yeah. 2011 at Ole Miss. I'd worked, you know, summers, occasionally in high school, and I've really loved working in the field with the guys. I didn't know anything about construction. I probably at the time thought I did, but if it
I remember you telling me you did in high school.
yeah, but I didn't know, looking back, I didn't know anything about construction. And I've got a degree in civil engineering from Ole Miss, and I left Oxford, moved to Baton Rouge, worked for a civil engineering, international civil engineering firm in Baton Rouge, Stantec Consulting, and man, I loved it. It was we had such a great team. I loved what I was doing. We're working for a business based out of Baton Rouge, a rental equipment company that was doing a huge expansion at the time, and so I had an opportunity to work on the consulting side of civil site design from Sacramento, California, to South Carolina, down to Florida, to Denver, Colorado. And so while I was in Baton Rouge, I got an opportunity to work with those municipalities to understand the due diligence of what that looks like. It also gave me a section view of how challenging the consulting world is from a design standpoint.
Mhm.
I think the stereotype of the designers is like, well, this is a copy and paste deal. It should be pretty easy.
Right.
And that's just not the case. And so they have to put a lot of forethought in what they're doing, and they have to ask a lot of questions. And sometimes that information is not there, or maybe the client didn't want to, pay for that. So did that for 2 years. And then I got a phone call from a close friend of mine from Ole Miss that he worked with a guy in Atlanta. It was a multifamily real estate investment group that managed, operated, bought and sold, and then also renovated multifamily
Mhm.
complexes in Atlanta. And in that, the president of the construction division was looking to hire a PM, and it was at that time him and four superintendents that helped manage the renovation of the multifamily businesses that or complexes that organization owned. And so I joined that in 2016, running a concurrent path. The president of that construction company also had begun getting a small commercial construction company off the ground. And it was at that time they were, operating a couple of projects, and it was medical, where they would go in and build out you know, a 3,000 square foot space and facilitate the installation of an MRI machine or a CAT scan or CT scan, what have you. And so again, I moved to Atlanta thinking I was going to be working for a multifamily group, and I found myself uh, at the ground floor of a general contracting firm that grew substantially year over year. And in that, a lot of that growth was because of our ability to meet our commitments to do what we say we were going to
Mm.
do. And um, you know, that company grew for the first 4 years at 100% revenue year over year, which was really, really fun, but really, really hard.
Yeah.
And, because there's a lot of growing pains in that.
Growth management.
Yep, yep. And then, but it for me gave me a front row seat of what it looked like to run a commercial contracting firm,
Wow.
right? And so
Couldn't have been designed better, right?
couldn't have been designed better. In that though, I never anticipated. My grandfather died in 2011. In that I never felt like when I moved to Baton Rouge, I never felt like I was going to go back. Like Worsham Brothers really never was on the radar
Mhm.
at that time. It was, let's go see what I can do in my career. And my parents encouraged me to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what's happening at Worsham Brothers during this interim period? You're in college, Baton Rouge, Atlanta. What's the company doing back in Corinth?
I think that during that time there was a couple of projects that probably did not go the way they wanted it to. And then the market, like I said, the market shifted, and it became very difficult for them to capture projects. So the company as itself shrunk.
Mm.
Now, like I said, the bones of the company remained, and that is what's so impressive, that the people of that firm hung in there and knew that there was better days ahead. They didn't know what the better days looked like, but they knew that this was a temporary moment. And that continued, up until um, you know, 2021, 2022.
Yeah. So, okay, let's talk about 21, 22. You're in Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
Worsham Brothers is kind of, it's still kicking, but it's a, kind of a shadow of what it was.
Yep.
What happens next?
So, my wife works for a large home improvement retail group based in Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
And she, in 2020, like everybody goes home, and she's in their media department, and she loves it. But we we started talking about, from a personal standpoint, what Atlanta looked like to us and our family. And we kept going back that we just really couldn't see ourselves long term in Atlanta, but we knew we loved Atlanta, but we just, and we started thinking about kids and what that looked like. It was really hard for us to picture. So then we started just looking at options. Well, what does Mississippi mean? And so, you know, I talked to, kind of halfway talked to some folks in Mississippi, what maybe a career looked like, but it just never felt right. And my wife actually kind of poked me. We would work from home, and after work, our rule was we'd put up all of our work stuff, put up our computers, and we'd go for a 30-minute walk and just kind of talk about our day. And the question came up, like, well, what about Corinth? Like, what about Worsham Brothers? What does that look like? And I was like, no, I don't know. My family's barely involved, and they probably don't want me, right?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where my mind was. And she's like, well, you should talk to them.
Yeah.
And so November of 2020, I mustered up the courage. I go and speak with my dad and one of his business partners just to feel the temperature in the room, just to mainly get my wife off my back, to say, you know,
I did it.
It can't happen. But what was unbelievably shocking was that they were very open to the conversation, and then I keep talking about the love of the place. They loved that company, and they wanted to see the company succeed, and they wanted to leave the company in a better place than they found it. And so, and of course, you know, I wanted to see the company succeed as well. So I think there was a mutual goal there. And so go back to Atlanta, Christmas we returned 2020, and I met with all three of the partners, and it was kind of funny in the conversation. It was very organic interview of one another, just kind of checking each other, kind of, what does this mean to you? What does this mean to you?
And so your dad is the only family member partner in this discussion.
Correct. So, and it was a great, 3-hour discussion. 1 hour meeting turned into 3 hours. And the partners really entrusted me to go out and figure out a plan to how we make it work.
So what were the issues? Like, what kind of things did you have to overcome, other than obviously capital, but what kind of, I always say, what kind of hair was on the deal? What problems did you have to solve to make something work?
I think the biggest thing is, when I was trying to understand was, how do we grow the business? Is there something out of their control that's hindering the growth of the business, right?
Yeah.
Like, that to me was the big question that I had. Or did they need just some help in doing it, right? I mean, I knew the people that were there could build huge structures and build it well. But I also knew that those opportunities weren't there in front of them. So that was always kind of my biggest question. The greatest thing in those conversations that I found, though, and I think this is where things started clicking in that conversation in Christmas of 2020, we walked away with, we're going to come up with a plan, but the company comes first.
Yeah.
It was not, I want to win in this, or, I feel like he wants to win in this. It was, what is best for the company? And for me, that's where it really was kind of jumping off point. They entrusted me to come up with a plan. I get back in Atlanta and I learn very quickly that I don't know anything about buying businesses.
M&A's its own beast, for sure.
Yeah. And so my father-in-law and his brother-in-law back in the early 2000s joined my wife's grandfather. He had a custom home construction company in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, that was very successful. Like many businesses of the early 2000s, they fell victim to the Great Recession in that market sector, but they had experience with family business, family construction business. So I poked his brain, and my father-in-law said, look, you need to talk to my brother-in-law, who is an attorney in Baton Rouge. Talk to him. And, I had a great conversation and just asked him, hey, if you could do it again, what would you do?
Yeah.
And so the first thing he said was hire an attorney. And it was not because he felt that I was going to get screwed in the deal. It's like family businesses are so complex,
Yes.
and not only do you need somebody to help you facilitate the complexities of business acquisition, but more times than not in family businesses, there is these unspoken assumptions, and it becomes very dangerous in long-term relationships. And one thing that he said is like, you can have an attorney and they're going to force the conversations of some pretty awkward things, but you're going to be so thankful in the back end once those conversations have been had to make sure that everybody understands where everybody stands, and everything's black and white. And it truly is a better experience to do it that way. And he said the other thing is hiring an attorney. And so talked to my wife. I didn't want to hire anybody in Mississippi in case the deal didn't go through, or if the deal did go through. I'm pretty private in that sense. I was like, I didn't want anybody to know my business. So I engaged through my wife's uncle, Phelps Dunbar in Baton Rouge, who were unbelievably helpful throughout the entire process. Tita Green and an accountant in Baton Rouge, and they, that's when really things started kicking off. And it took about 6 months to come up with that plan. Fall of 21, I returned back to Corinth, and this fall of 21 is really when things began to unravel in a good way.
Yeah.
Worsham Brothers, the partners, connected me with their attorneys, their accounting team, their surety company, their insurance brokers, and said, look, here they are, you talk to them. And they said, the only rule is we got to keep the company first. And that was the understanding of everybody involved. And with that being the mindset, it became very simple to make sure that we protected the longevity of the company, because it was bigger than just the partners. It was, we had families that were involved, and we wanted to protect that.
Years.
That's right. Yeah. So we wanted to protect that, and we also wanted to protect the company that everybody loved so much, So I was so grateful for the conversations that I had with insurance brokers, surety companies, attorneys, CPAs that Worsham Brothers plugged me in with. They were extremely honest. They were open book. And in that we developed a really good strategic plan for me to Bob, the senior member of the partnership. And we really got through the winter, and then the spring. When I started in April of 22, we inked the deal then, and it's rest is history. I mean, really.
So kind of what did that structure end up looking like? I know, a lot of times when I work with clients, especially on the buy side, it's like, okay, how much cash can we afford to spend up front? What do we think the actual value of this business is based on the free cash flows? And then, okay, we don't have enough cash on hand to really front load this thing. How do we structure it? Or, if there's some kind of, big threat that the company faces, maybe we structure it in a different way in order to kind of mitigate that risk. What did that structure end up looking like?
Well, when you take the mindset of company first, right? And you take it from that perspective, that's exactly what we did. So I had an earn-out agreement with the senior partner, and we set metrics. We put metrics in place. We valued the company, we valued his shares, and then the metrics were, okay, the company's got to be profitable. We got to pay our taxes. And then we created a floor that we had to meet before we even did any distributions at that point for that earnout. Okay. So it was not a situation where that we saw a little bit of profit and, we pulled cash out just for me to handle earnout. And so I had anticipated it was probably going to take me 14 years to make the transition of the transaction, and there's some unbelievable hard work. We were able to do it in 1 year, and the hard work of the people that were there. I mean, when the bones are so good, I was blown away by the hard work and effort that I saw when I was there. It was really amazing what the guys and gals at Worsham Brothers can do.
Yeah, so talk about that a little bit. I mean, I have a lot of clients and talk to a lot of people who've stepped into buying a business, or conversely, clients who've sold their business, and others, somebody with a lot of gas in the tank stepping in. When I was in the Navy, the old phrase was, "Hey, the day you take command of a squadron, make sure the first thing you change is your own office, and wait about 3 months to change everything else."
Yeah.
How did that look for you walking back into a family business that you've been away from for a long time?
So, like I told you, like during due diligence, and again, there was, my name was obvious on the front door. So there was that emotional piece, but I continued to lie to myself saying I wasn't going to make this emotional decision, and
Not possible.
yeah, not possible. But I was very thorough in the due diligence process. And, while the numbers told one story, there was something that continued to really jump out at me. And it was people, the people that had been there during the really good times were still there, and I could never figure that out.
Yeah.
And so I wanted to understand, what is it about this place that kept the great people here. And so when I transitioned back, the first thing that I really wanted to jump into was understand the complexities of that. And what I found was everybody was working really, really hard at their job, but there was just like a little bit of help that everybody needed to be able to get to that next step. And, the office staff was working really, really hard. The field staff was working really, really hard. The field staff couldn't get the help they needed because the office staff was trying to get work. And so one thing that I kind of took ownership of was, well, the folks on the ground are the folks that build the buildings. Like, without a doubt, they are the industry experts, and we count on them. And they are so good at what they do. I'm going to help them. Like, whatever they need, we're going to get them answers. And in that, we're going to meet our commitments. So that was the first thing. The other thing too is, they had gone through a 10-year period of really hard times, right? Well, more 8-year period of hard times. And so there was a little bit of, I don't want to say pessimistic, but they were tired, right? And so we identified we just started identifying wins. Like, what are we winning? Yeah. And so we had weekly meetings, and we would talk about, our commitments, and we would say, I would tell them, like, hey guys, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
Like, and so we started building confidence there. And the other thing too is, construction, a lot of, I always tell people the perception is reality, so we're going to make sure that our projects are operating the right way, clean job site, safe job site. But for me, also really digging into the individual project's financials. And what I found was the projects were running fairly well financially, but there was always like a one thing that they could maybe do a little bit different, and to really help them operate the project and make it better for the customer. And that was the end goal. How do we make the experience a little bit different than everybody else? The last thing that I noticed was there have not been investments in the infrastructure in some time. So working with our accounting team and our attorneys and our surety company, we made some investments in some project management software that I'd used in Atlanta in my previous company, that I found could add efficiencies to the project, to the projects, and make things easier for the administrative staff to manage budget and schedule. So we implemented that. The existing accounting software that we had would not integrate with that project software. So not only did we add a new project management software, but we also upgraded our accounting software concurrently, which was not fun. But
how do people like that? Yeah.
It was hard. It was really, really, really hard. But I have got so much respect for our controller and our accounting team. They went all in and they made it happen. And today we operate with such more efficiencies, so much more efficiency, and really operate at a high level because we're making real-time financial decisions on projects.
Yeah.
The next thing of that for the guys in the field, we go back to talking about how we support them. Prior to this project management software, if a question came up on a project site, they were either having to haul around physical set of drawings or they're having to walk, 15 minutes back to their office.
Mm-hmm.
Today, they get to open up their cell phone, open up the drawings, maybe check shop drawings, understand where they are in the submittal process. And so a little bit, it's way more efficient for those guys to get their job done as well. And that's the ultimate goal. How can we make the guys that are really good at building things, how do we make their jobs easier?
That's so cool to hear, like, bringing it full circle, like go into a firm with that much family, emotional, personal history, and then just kind of market history, and being able to like take those experiences and not, in a heavy-handed way, but just apply those efficiencies here and there, and then watch kind of the final product be pretty be multiplied. So what's the future look like? Where is Worsham Brothers going? Where are you now? How do you see yourself in the market, and what does Mississippi's market look like in general?
Well, I'm very optimistic about the market. We were talking before the podcast a little bit. I think everybody was a little bit nervous early in the year with all this tariff talk, and as someone that sells pre-engineered metal buildings,
Metals
steel prices were definitely top of mind often, but I'm very optimistic about the market in North Mississippi. There's a lot of growth, both locally. We've got a great economic development group, and then from the state standpoint, there's so much growth in the state. Mm-hmm. And then regionally, we don't only work in Mississippi, we work West Tennessee and Alabama. You look at Huntsville, there's so much growth here, and I think that that growth's not going to stop. And we want to be there to be able to capture that. When we talk about growth, though, we're very strategic in how we grow. Yeah. We have metrics and target growth, but it's a healthy growth. As I mentioned, I have worked for companies that go through fast growth, and it can be taxing, not only for leadership, but also for the employees. And so we want to be mindful of why we work. I work for my family, in the sense I go to work every day so I can provide a great life for my children and for my wife, and all the employees at Worsham Brothers to say the same thing. So if that is the purpose and the why, then I don't want to, grow this company to some level just because, and everybody work, 90 hours a week and not get to see their family. You start losing purpose and hope. So, healthy growth is what we're looking for. We're also looking for strategic partners, on both the design side, our subcontractor, trade partner, vendors, and clients, people that are going to value what we provide in a construction process. They're and those people exist, and they're looking for general contractors to be a part of their team. And that was something that stood out to me during my time in Atlanta, that there is a purpose for a general contractor. We add value into the construction project. Anybody can pick up the phone and call a painter or a drywall person or a flooring person or a dirt contractor. Mm-hmm. But to do that in a way that is safe for the people that work on your project site, it protects the owner. It maintains a high standard of quality, and we meet our commitments. And to that, I think that that's how we add value, and so we try to do those things very, very well.
It's really interesting. Everybody kind of wants to shoot the moon, create a 10 out of 10 business tomorrow.
Yeah,
that idea of like reasonable, consistent growth. It dovetails perfectly with what your great granddad started, right?
Yeah,
I mean, like that was the ideal.
Yeah,
like, let's invest in the infrastructure of this state because A, it's good economically, but B, it makes things better.
Yeah.
And the target isn't this enormous valuation. It's just doing something consistently better and better.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I mean, what does like the far future look like? I mean, how do you see, obviously there's a long history to look back at.
Yeah.
And, there's a lot of data on tough times, good times, resets. Um, what is kind of not the end of your career, but how do you see this business going in the far future?
Great question. Is something that I think about all the time. Not that I'm not going to leave ever. And probably because I truly love what I do and who I do it with. And so as I think about Worsham Brothers, where I'd like to see the business, I would like to see the business at some point be able to function, without a single person, right?
Mhm.
And it be more truly, a business that can operate and be
Enterprise scale.
that's right, and be self-sufficient. But what I don't want to see happen to Worsham Brothers is to lose its commitment to professionalism and hard work. And when we tell somebody we're going to do it, we do it. So I think that if we grow the business with that mindset, and it's that company first mindset, as it relates to how we operate the business and invest in the business, then I think the growth will come. And so I don't know where that growth takes us.
Yeah.
I think it would be fun to have a fifth generation incorporated. We are a family business, and I think that there are that's what makes us great and makes us stand out, be a little bit different than our competitors. But again, I work for my family, and so if we could get Worsham Brothers in a place that doesn't necessarily need me, they may like having me around, or maybe just be
I'm sure they do.
The old guy that's like, oh, he's back in the office today. I do want to build a team and develop careers in the construction business that continues to add value and a little bit of different experience for our customers.
That's incredible. I've never seen that people first mentality fail.
Yeah, well,
That's a good one.
they're so important to what we do.
Yeah,
They're so important.
absolutely. Well, Hayden, man, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for coming in. It's great to see you. I'm so glad that we bumped into each other last time I was in Corinth. So anyway, thank you so much for joining the Sell Side Podcast. Check us out anywhere you get your podcasts. Thanks.